When I was 20, I left my sleepy little French hometown for the United States, heart pounding with excitement and nerves, to become an au pair for the Joseph family. They lived in a picture-perfect, upper-middle-class neighborhood. Quiet streets lined with neat houses and sprawling backyards, the kind of place that screams safety and normalcy. I remember stepping off the plane, breathing a sigh of relief, thinking, this will be a breeze. Nothing bad happens here. I was tasked with looking after two boys. Brock, 12, a typical preteen, lazy, occasionally rude but harmless, glued to his Xbox, and Brandon, 9, who chilled me to the bone from the moment we met. There was a coldness in his eyes, an emptiness I couldn't name, like he was sizing me up. When I introduced myself, he stared silently, unblinking, before smirking and asking, "Are you the maid?" I laughed it off, but his gaze lingered, sharp and unnerving. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. Brandon wasn't just difficult, as his parents had warned. He was cruel. He wove lies like a spider spins webs, effortless and malicious. He told his teacher Brock had tried to choke him in the kitchen, a complete fabrication. He whispered to the neighbor that his parents locked him in a closet at night. Once, with a sly grin, he told me the last au pair fled because of him and was never seen again. I brushed it off as kid stuff, but a shiver ran down my spine. Then came the night that broke me. 2 months in, I pulled back my sheets to climb into bed and froze. Hundreds of thumbtacks glinted in the dim light, scattered across my mattress, their sharp points aimed upward like tiny daggers. My heart slammed against my ribs as I realized how close I'd come to lying on them. Earlier that day, I'd caught Brandon peeking through my door while I folded clothes, his face pressed to the crack, watching. I'd thought nothing of it. Until now. Fear took root after that. He started shadowing me, a silent ghost haunting the house, peering around corners, staring from doorways while I cooked or read, his eyes locked on me, unblinking. I'd look up, and there he'd be, sitting across the room, still as stone. I said nothing, too scared to confront him, avoiding him like a plague. Then one afternoon, while watering flowers in the garden, a rancid stench hit me, sharp, sour, like death. I followed it to a patch of freshly turned soil and dug with a trembling hand. What I found made my stomach lurch. 3 dead rabbits, their twisted bodies sliced open, one with its legs bound by string. I ran inside, sobbing, to tell the Josephs. They questioned Brandon, who blinked innocently and swore it wasn't him. They believed him, dismissing it as some neighborhood kid's prank. That night, I started locking my bedroom door. As we walked to our cars, Hunter grabbed my arm out of nowhere, his voice blunt. "Come home with me." I shook my head, lying that I was exhausted and had work in the morning, but he wouldn't let it go, pressing me, even offering to drive me to work the next day. I was stunned by how relentless he was, drunk or not, and the thought of him behind the wheel like that only made me more uneasy. Right then, I decided I was done with him. I hurried to my car, drove off into the night, keeping it slow because the alcohol still lingered in my system, my heart pounding in my chest. I flew back to France the next day, shattered. My dream of a grand adventure reduced to ashes. For months, depression swallowed me whole. I'd lost my shot at the US, my confidence, everything. Years later, I clawed my way back, building a life here with a good job and friends who feel like family. But Brandon haunts me still, a shadow in my mind, a boy whose evil I can't unsee. I wonder who he's become, and it keeps me up at night. I came to Northern California from a tiny German village, a speck on the map most Americans wouldn't even know existed, chasing a dream of living in the US and becoming a child psychologist. At 22, I was an au pair, fearless and free-spirited, soaking up every moment in this wealthy suburb with its jaw-dropping houses and buzzing college town nearby. My lifeline was Jennifer, an American girl I met through the agency, tall, loud, and just like me, hungry to explore. We owned the weekends, hitting frat parties and bars with our foreign accents as our golden ticket. Our favorite haunt was Tap, a dive bar where Tuesdays turned into Taco Tuesdays, the air thick with laughter and cheap tequila. That's where I met Sebi, a tall guy with curly brown hair and a smile that hit me like a warm breeze. "You're German, right?" he said, catching me off guard as I waited for drinks. No one ever guessed that specific. I laughed, charmed, and we talked for hours, his knowledge of German culture pulling me in like a magnet. He wasn't like the usual guys, all cheesy lines and shallow grins. CB felt real, curious about me, not just my accent. We clicked fast. He met Jenny, his friend Hunter tagged along, and soon we were a weekend fixture. Dinners, drinks, late-night talks. One night, he cooked me dinner at his place, a cozy pie bubbling in the oven, wine flowing, and I stayed over, wrapped in the glow of something new. The next morning, I woke up to his pristine apartment, walls lined with black and white photos, castles, cities, countryside scenes. They felt familiar, and then I saw it. Every single one was from Germany, stamped with locations. Above his bed, my breath caught. A shot of my village, a place so small it barely had a name, captured from above. "Got a thing for German architecture?" I teased, heart fluttering at the wild coincidence. He grinned, said they were his dad's aerial shots, and asked about my hometown with this eager spark in his eyes. I melted a little more. Weeks flew by in a blur of perfection. He was sweet, thoughtful, attentive, making sure I felt safe and seen. Even Jenny liked him, though Hunter's weird strip teases to take it off, raised some eyebrows. Then came the cracks. One drunken night, stumbling back to his place, he rambled about loving German women, how he'd always wanted a foreign wife, who was great with kids. It stung, a strange note in our symphony, but I let it slide. He had been flawless until then. At an Italian dinner he planned, he bragged about the vegetarian options. I froze. I'd never told him I was vegetarian. "How'd you know?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Saw it on your Insta," he said casually. My gut twisted. That post was years old, buried under hundreds of others from my life in Germany. How far had he scrolled? Doubt gnawed at me. The next time I stayed over, I waited until he was asleep, his phone glowing on the nightstand. I'd seen his password, 1234, careless as hell, and unlocked it with shaking hands. What I found ripped the air from my lungs. A folder labeled wife, stuffed with screenshots of my Instagram, posts, captions, tagged spots, even expired stories I'd forgotten. His notes app was a nightmare. Translations of my old posts, a schedule of my outings pieced from my stories, details about my village, my likes, my life, all mined from my profile. Then the worst, a photo of my driver's license, lost at a frat party my second night in America. My stomach dropped. That's how he'd found me, tracked me, planned. Me. A vile message to some friend detailed what he wanted to do to me, too sick to repeat. The CB I knew vanished, replaced by a stranger who'd orchestrated every smile, every touch. I grabbed my stuff and slipped out, heart hammering, tears burning my eyes as I drove back to my host family's house. Germans guard privacy like a fortress. I felt violated, hollowed out. He'd had my full name, my birthday, everything. My au pair profile was private, but with that ID, he could have found anything. His text blew up my phone the next day. Where'd I go? Why'd I leave? Did I snoop? I sent one reply. Contact me again, and I call the cops. Then I blocked him, locked down my accounts, and lived in dread he'd show up. 3 months passed, but the fear didn't. A silver car started circling my street, idling across from the house. Fake numbers and Instagram accounts pinged me, begging to talk. I'm sure it's him. I'm building a case for the police, counting the days until my au pair gig ends and I can flee back to Germany. Every creak in the house jolts me awake now, terrified he knows where I am and what he's planning next.